Hi guys, today I wanted to show you how to make a delicious batch of Lamingtons. They're an Australian favourite, but today we'll do them with the coffee kick. Typically Lamingtons are made from a sponge cake rather than a butter or a chiffon cake, so it's really light and fluffy. I'd say it's the most important step, and it's a step that can usually go wrong, is beating the egg whites. I always clean my bowl before I put the egg whites in there, because any fat, hidden fat, you may not see it, or grease, will actually stop the egg whites from getting as much volume as they need for a sponge cake. So I just wipe it with some white vinegar. And I'd even consider doing the whisk as well. Now we can separate our eggs. Firstly, we need to separate the yolks from the whites. So the recipe calls for 3 egg yolks and 3 egg whites. The fresher, the better. Now that we've separated the eggs, I'm going to put these yolks over there for later, and we can start whisking. So we've got our egg whites in the bowl. We're just going to add 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. This just helps stabilise the egg whites and helps them to reach their full potential or volume. And we're going to beat this until they reach soft peaks, and then we'll add our sugar. Okay, it's looking good. Now I'm going to add 1/4 cup of caster sugar gradually to the egg whites. And I'm going to turn it up to a high speed until they form glossy peaks. Oh my goodness, have a look. Check them out. So now I'm going to put them off to the side, and we're going to work on our yolks. Okay, so the egg yolks are back, and I'm going to add them into our mixing bowl, and we're going to beat them until they're smooth. That should only take about 30 seconds. And then we're going to add in our caster sugar and vanilla. Gradually add 3/4 cup of caster sugar and then 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla essence. I think they're ready. They're looking a beautiful pale yellow colour, and I think we're ready to add our dry and wet mix. Okie dokie. So our dry ingredients. I've sifted already 1 cup of plain flour, 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. I'm going to sift it one more time because, as I said before, we're trying to get as much air into the mix as we possibly can. And I've also got here 1/2 cup of delicious brewed coffee. Now that the flour's been triple sifted, I'm going to add it to the yolk mix, alternating with the coffee. Just add a little bit at a time and gently fold. Don't be too rough with it, because you're going to knock out some of that air that we already whipped into the eggs. Coffee. Now that that's all combined, I'm going to add the egg whites. Key is, with this step, like everything in this recipe, is gently add the egg whites, little by little, because we don't want to knock all the air out that we created whisking them before. And fold, not stir, fold. Sounded like a teacher. Okay, that looks good. There are a few streaks in there, but you don't want to overbeat it, because that will affect the texture of the sponge. I've pre-lined a tin, and I've also preheated the oven to 170 degrees, so I'd say it's ready to go in. Shot licking the bowl. Cool. While the cake's in the oven, we're going to get started on the filling. So I've got 250 grams of mascarpone here. We're going to give that a little bit of a mix, and we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of chilled coffee, but I'm only going to add a little bit initially because we don't want it to be too runny. And some light muscovado sugar, which is just unrefined sugar, and they've kept all the molasses in there, so it gives it a really nice rich flavour. But if you don't have this, you can use light brown sugar. Maybe just add a little bit more. Just taste it. And I'm just going to have a taste. I'm going to put some more sugar in. So that was probably about another tablespoon, and I'm gonna finish off the coffee. You can do all of this to taste. Looks delish. It's a pretty good texture. Spreadable, which is what you want. Okay, I'm gonna pop that in the fridge to let it set for a little bit, not too much. So the cake was in the oven for about 35 minutes. Every oven's different, so just keep an eye on it. And we've let it cool. And now we're gonna cut it horizontally so that we can add our delicious mascarpone filling. It's probably best to get an even surface and a serrated knife. I'm just making long, smooth motions. It's pretty even. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the top. Might use this. Just slide it over. You don't want to break it. We've got our 2 halves. Now it's time to add the filling. It chilled in the fridge for maybe about 5 minutes. You can use your spatula to do it, but I've got an icing one here. You don't want to go all the way to the edges because as soon as you put the top layer of the sponge on, the pressure will force the filling out a little bit. I could do this for hours. I'm being a bit too pedantic. Cool, let's do it. Tastes so great. So let's put the top layer of our cake back on. Careful not to break it in half. Looking good. Okay, we're nearly there. So we'll get on to our icing. I've got 3 cups of icing sugar that's already been sifted, and I'm gonna add 3/4 cup of cocoa powder. Just give that a quick sift. You could use normal chocolate if you wanted. Now the wet ingredients. I've got 75 grams of melted butter. That's going in. And 1/3 cup of boiling water. Voila. And give that a stir. And we want it to be nice and silky. There goes half of the mix. This wouldn't be my cooking show if I didn't make a big mess, so that's looking good actually. Very silky. Just drip off the cakes when I dip them in there. Oh, okay. We're going to cut our cake. Have a hot chucks nearby just to get your knife a good wipe, and it will tend to cut much easily with a hot. Oh my God, I cut it too far this way. Okay, we're done. Beautiful little squares. Now, the fun bit. Okay, so it's time to frost. So, just dip side by side into the chocolate. You can do this with a fork on either side of the cake, but let's be honest, does it really matter if your fingers get chocolate all over them? Yeah, it is really messy if I haven't said that already. And I'm just gonna hold it here for a little bit to let all that excess chocolate just drip off. Straight into the coconut. And just like with the chocolate, we just want to cover each side with the coconut, and it's ready to go onto the rack and let all the excess coconut and chocolate drip off. Awesome, next one. So there you have it, delicious coffee lamingtons. Don't mind if I do. Oh my God, it's too good, you have to try it.